Hi everybody, nice to see you back on the channel. Thanks for dropping by. Today I wanted to talk about Netflix. A lot of people, language learning channels in general seem to have one pretty much obligatory video where they talk about how to use Netflix to study languages. To me that seems a bit silly. To me it's obvious how you use any sort of video resource to learn languages. You watch something, put the subtitles on if you want to. Subtitles in your own language, subtitles in a target language, whatever works for you, and you watch things and you listen to them and you rewind when you don't understand things occasionally, depending on how intensively you want to study, and you basically write stuff down and take notes, and that's it. I don't see why anyone would need to have it explained to them how they should study languages with Netflix. That doesn't make any sense to me. It's like saying, how should you study languages by reading? Read a book, look stuff up, write stuff down, take notes, keep going. It's not rocket science. But I don't want to make one of these brainless videos about how to study languages on Netflix. I just wanted to express my gratitude actually to Netflix. When I started studying Japanese about 27 years ago at university, man, the biggest hurdle was the difficulty of finding access to decent listening resources. There was no internet to speak of, certainly no YouTube, certainly no Netflix. It was a bit grim, and because of the difficulty of learning to understand a foreign language in its spoken form, because of the raw cognitive difficulty involved in that precisely, listening is the place where you need to spend really just one of the biggest chunks of your time when you're trying to learn a foreign language, any foreign language. And this has all changed thanks to technology, thanks to the internet, thanks to YouTube, thanks to everything that's been made possible by the internet as it exists today. But Netflix is such an interesting addition to this listening puzzle that I wanted to talk about it a little bit, and like I said, express my thanks. To me, I don't know how many people there are here who have watched Arcane, this fantastic animated series that came out exclusively on Netflix. It's a Netflix production that came out exclusively on Netflix probably about a year and a half ago now. I, like many people, thought that it was absolutely fantastic. I've watched it, I don't know how many times I've watched it. Twice in Russian, twice in Spanish, probably twice in Mandarin Chinese. But you'll notice that I didn't include English there amongst the languages that I have watched it in. And the reason for that is simply that I have not yet watched it in English. I have watched it in foreign languages. What an amazing thing to be able to do. I am currently studying Chinese, and it is fairly obvious to me that I am not going to have any sort of durable long-term relationship with the fairly brainless, mindless stuff that passes for Chinese dramas. I don't want to anybody off, but Asian dramas, by which I mean Chinese, Japanese, Korean dramas, are pretty one-dimensional on the whole. There are some slightly more interesting and sort of edgy Korean dramas out there, and if I was studying Korean, maybe I'd be able to persevere with that kind of stuff a bit more. Chinese dramas look pretty mindless to me. I'm really not interested in spending time watching stuff like that. But Netflix to the rescue. Going back to Russian for a moment, there's a small amount of original Russian language content, by which I mean stuff made in Russian, right, on Netflix. I don't think that I would be very interested in, to be honest, any of it. And anyone who's ever studied a language seriously will agree with me, I think, when I say that in the long term, you've really got to have a lot of stuff that you're interested in. There's going to have to be a lot of stuff that you're interested in if you're going to persevere with your language studies in the long term. Now, if you like reading, if reading is the main way that you acquire language, that you get exposure to language, then in a sense you're fortunate, because it's relatively easy to get hold of reading material. And one piece of reading material can last you for a hell of a long time, right? If you're reading, I don't know, Game of Thrones in French, if you're studying French, that book can last you a long time. You can learn a lot from it. But with listening, it's harder. it's harder to gain access to a single resource that can last for, in principle, hundreds of hours, like a book can, right? If you're studying intensively. So, what's the point? The point is that Netflix seems to be a bit of a godsend. I like Spanish. I'd like to study Spanish more in the future, and virtually everything that you can watch on Netflix seems to be available in Spanish. What a thing to have access to. What a thing. I've never really found any original Spanish content that I've been particularly interested in. Maybe there's good stuff out there, but whoa man, if you can watch anything that's out there in its Spanish dub, think of the difference that makes to somebody like me who basically focuses these days on learning languages through listening and speaking, not through reading. It's colossal, absolutely colossal. You know, I had reached a point with my Russian where I would probably have found it quite difficult to keep motivating myself to study new stuff, to learn new stuff, to try and acquire new vocabulary, etc., etc. If I had not come across Netflix and its many Russian dubs. Netflix doesn't seem to be producing Russian language dubs for any content anymore, presumably because of the war in Ukraine. So the reasons are political, right? In other words, but everything that was already available in Russian is still available in Russian, and there's a lot of stuff that was available in Russian. So that made a lot of difference to me. You know, instead of watching relatively serious podcasts and things like that on YouTube, I can watch zombie films or, you know, fantasy, anime, or American dramas of whatever sort, and it makes a huge difference. You know, the amount of language you get exposed to, the variety of the language, you know, that you get exposed to like that is tremendous. Really, as a language learning resource, it's absolutely phenomenal. And of course, you know, the irony is that it wasn't designed for that reason. You know, Netflix have stuck all these different dubs to their content because they want the stuff to be watchable by as many people as possible. But for people like me, that's been an absolute godsend. An absolute godsend. At the moment, I'm spending a lot of time studying Mandarin Chinese. The amount of content they have dubbed into Mandarin Chinese is relatively limited. They've got a lot of original Chinese dramas, but they're not really my cup of tea, and I would only watch that stuff to study Chinese if I were desperate. Having said that, if you take, I'm watching, what's it called again? I can't even remember what it's called. This cartoon, there's something of Arvaros, the legend, mystery, can't remember. The one with the dragon egg. I just started watching it because it was available in Russian and in Chinese. But to have something like that, 4 seasons, 9 episodes each, 20 minutes per episode, to have something like that, that's actually quite entertaining, quite watchable, in the language you're studying. People like me, we would have killed to have stuff like that in Japanese. Back in the bad old days, when it was really hard to gain access to listening material. It makes a huge difference. And if, like me, you tend to study relatively small amounts of material very intensively, rather than much larger amounts of material in a sort of more take it as it comes, free and easy fashion, then a relatively small amount of content keeps you going for a hell of a long time. So it's an absolute godsend. You know, one of the great things about studying Japanese as a language has been that if you have any sort of stomach at all for anime, then you just can't run out of stuff to listen to. Now, 30 years ago, nearly, when I was studying Japanese, we didn't have the internet. At least we effectively didn't have the internet. We didn't have broadband. You couldn't download this stuff. But anyone who's been willing to acquire pirate copies of anime in whatever fashion, those people have been very fortunate. I don't know if you're studying Spanish or German or Italian or European languages, what content do you watch? I don't know. I've never had to think about it. I've never had to solve this problem. What do I listen to if I'm studying Italian? But Netflix has, certainly for people like me, it's radically altered the language learning process. Altered it quite fundamentally, arguably. The other thing I appreciate is being able to listen to very clear, dubbed versions of these various things that I watch. There's a lot of difference between listening to a dub and listening to the original audio recorded with all of the imperfections that end up in audio when it's recorded live. You know, when you're listening to a dub on Netflix, or when you're just watching anime or animation in general, everything that you're hearing has obviously been recorded in a sound studio with very high quality mics, etc., etc. So listening to the Spanish dub of Arcane and listening to Spanish language dramas on Netflix, those are two very different things. And I tend to attach more importance to acquiring clearly spoken language that interests me than I do to listening to more natively spoken language with all the imperfections and reductions, phonetic reductions, right, that implies. So I'd rather watch the Spanish dub of Lilo and Stitch and hear that clearly than struggle through some Colombian drama with much lower sound quality, etc., etc. I mean, that's a decision that I've made. That's something that's reflective of what's important to me, and what is not so important. But Netflix, yeah, I think it's absolutely incredible, especially if you're studying, or if you have been studying more than one language. You know, I mean, the languages that I've studied have always been quite big languages: Japanese, Spanish, Russian, Chinese. You know, I'm not studying Albanian or Quechua or, you know, I don't know, Azerbaijani or anything. So if you are studying relatively big languages, then Netflix is just the most incredible language learning resource. And of course, it's also got loads of anime in the original Japanese. If you're studying Korean, Chinese, it's obviously pretty good. Spanish perhaps is not too bad if you want the original content. But from my point of view, to be able to watch precisely the things that I want to watch, but in the relevant target language that I happen to be studying at any moment in time, this is going back to the example of Arcane, right? To me, that's absolutely incredible, because I know that I'm interested in it. I know I'm not going to have to force myself to watch the drama, film, whatever it may be in question. So nothing particularly original there. Anyone who's ever stopped to think about it will be well aware of the fact that Netflix is an incredible language learning resource for virtually anyone interested in learning foreign languages. But hey, if anyone at Netflix is listening, thanks very much, because you've certainly done me a big favor. And that is it for today. Thanks for listening. I will see you in the near future, undoubtedly. Thanks again, and ciao ciao, bye bye.